It is going. All right, we're live. So, this is a presentation called How to Be Awesome. It was originally about the developer mindset, but I thought that was a really boring presentation title. It's essentially Principles for Being Great. Or you could also call it, if you want, if I can click, How to Not Suck. So that's the other name of the presentation. It's got two because it's sort of bipolar. Firstly, I want to start with a disclaimer and say I'm just going to read a little bit. I'm not always the best at this. I'm not necessarily an expert at the things that I'm promoting here, and you guys will probably think of times when I'll say something and be like, you should do this, and you'll be like, you don't do that, Steve, and so sorry about that. In other words, sometimes I suck. So that's just a disclaimer. I'm not the best, but I have a lot of good stuff to say, I think. I'm just relaying this information, and it's fun. So to start off, I just want to present the idea that software is hard. We have a hard job. We don't solve easy problems. In any given day, you might need 4 different programming languages, or 5 or 6, depending on what you're doing. You need probably at least knowledge of 4 different frameworks. You need the ability to work with third-party APIs, the ability to solve problems by doing more than just Googling, because none of our stuff is on Google, because it's really hard, so we just have to read the code. So we have a hard job. And also, among all that, we have to have some ability to communicate what we're doing. So software is hard. Arbitrarily, we're going to do a little math to figure out exactly how software might be hard. So let's imagine you need, on a given project, 4 languages: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, C#. Easy enough. 4 different frameworks: Fugu, Angular, jQuery, underscore. That was easy. 1 third-party API, let's pretend it's Twitter. 1 domain, because we're pretending. As we all know here, especially, we have a whole bunch of domains that we work with, given the different products. And so if you add those all together, you have 10 different skills. So you might think that this is a problem of addition, right? So you have 1 language and you add another language to it and you say, oh, well, that's just an added language. But in reality, everything that we're dealing with here touches each other. They're all connected. And so I would say that it's actually a factorial problem. And to do this math, it's 10 to the power of 10, right? So in reality, with our arbitrary math, that is an arbitrary difficulty level of 10 billion with a B. So we're all worth 10 billion points as employees. Aren't we awesome? And this isn't just for developers. QA as well have a rough time. You guys have to know all of our different products. You have to know all kinds of how the floor works, how to test the products, and every specific nook and cranny. So it's hard for all of us. Software, just in general, is hard. The converse to that is, luckily, software is soft. There are many ways of looking at this idea that software is soft. First, it's like, okay, who of us wore a hard hat here today, right? So in that way, we all wore soft hats. Just kidding. So in that way, software is easy. But what I really mean here is that just because it's been done a certain way doesn't mean that it has to be done that way. Software is malleable in that sense. It can be morphed and changed as we need it to. So we don't have, the reason that oftentimes jobs are not soft is because people pay for giant pieces of machinery and say, this cost us $4 million, we have to use it, right? We don't have that problem here, and hopefully in most productive development environments, we don't say, oh, well, we paid big giant amounts, so we have to use this. Even the expensive stuff for us developers, like Visual Studio, is pretty expensive, but we're willing to say, yep, it's not working for this project, let's do something else, right? We don't have to use it. So software is soft. And it's all for a better product. So for you personally, Alex, just kidding, for everybody, if you find something that needs to change in a piece of software, change it. Wow, that's a pretty novel concept. Change it. Like I said, when you come into a project, it doesn't have to be the way that it is exactly. If you see some way to get the product to be better, do that thing. Make the product better. That's our goal. So if something needs to change to make it better, then change it. That's easy enough. But caveat: be careful. You can't just change things just because you arbitrarily say, oh, this could be better, so I'm going to change it. You want to take a team lead or somebody who's taking ownership of the project and say, this is what I want to do, communicate that, and say, how hard do we think this is going to be? Is it going to be worth a change? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a really difficult change for very little net outcome, and it's just not worth it. But you have to gauge, will it be worth the effort? Nonetheless, software is soft, and you can change things. So software is hard, software is soft. Secondly, another point to remember is that it's all your responsibility. It's all your responsibility. If it comes into your purview, that's your responsibility. So I was talking to Corey about this, and he might correct me if he was here. I'm not sure I remember the story exactly. But basically I said, I've been thinking about this idea that it's all your responsibility. You just take ownership of it when it comes to you, right? And he's like, yeah, so when I was in the military, he said, they put me in charge of this shop. And after about a month's working there, we had a meeting, and I said, okay, well, all this stuff went wrong, but it was for this reason and that reason, and this guy screwed up and that guy screwed up, and basically saying none of it's my fault. I did what I was supposed to do, but what was supposed to happen didn't happen. And his higher-ups said, we don't care. That's your responsibility. The shop is your responsibility. Even if somebody else screwed up and didn't do their job, that is under your purview. It's your responsibility. Do you want to keep running this shop? And Corey's like, yeah. So they basically said, we don't want to hear excuses. We don't want to hear somebody did the wrong thing. Just fix it, move on, and get the job done. So to take that into our environment, basically, don't pass the buck, right? If a good example is writing tests. If you come to something that's untested and you say, somebody else should have done this, I'm just going to leave it. No, then it comes back to you. You worked in that area, and you didn't write tests for it, just like the previous guy. But now it's your fault because that's now your responsibility, right? So again. There's always a give and take with this stuff. Don't sacrifice your own personal velocity for writing tests around every little thing in the project. A good rule of thumb in that case might be what you're working on and the stuff it touches. So write tests for the thing you're working on and the stuff that it depends on, if those things don't have tests. And don't go outside of that circle because you're going to slow yourself way down. I know from experience. So don't blame somebody else if something's bad. You know, if somebody comes to you and says, oh, well, this thing is wrong here, don't go, oh, well, so-and-so screwed it up, and that was their job, and now it's me, and who cares, I did it right, my part. Well, no, your part was this at this point, so you should have helped to do that right too. Don't pass the buck. Just fix it. Conversely to that, and so that's sort of macro level. Something's in your purview, it's your responsibility, but it's not your responsibility. On the micro level, there are things, and to be fair, as basic regular developers, this principle on the micro level doesn't come into play as much. Nobody's coming to us and saying, hey, I need you to interface with the client for this thing. Like, they just expect us to write code, but for like QA analysts or dev team leads, that's a big problem. People will come to them and say, hey, you need to do this thing, and they have to determine, I really shouldn't be doing that thing. I can make sure that that thing gets done, but that's not my responsibility. Sometimes something will block you that needs to get fixed, and it might not be yours to fix. Like the easy example was the client needs something to happen. Well, or the client expects something to happen and you can't make that happen. It's not your job to tell that to the client. That's somebody else's job, right? So that's not your responsibility, but you have to know. More specifically, when it comes to code for developers, if somebody comes to you because you're like a domain expert at this certain piece of a project, they say, hey, I have this problem in this area that you worked on, that you built. Fix it for me. Well, no, don't fix it for them. Say, no, this is your responsibility now. Let me walk you through it. Let me teach you how to do it. So that is not your responsibility, though it might have previously been. But we need to help each other to understand these things. And it takes a little bit of time. I run into this problem a lot. Somebody comes to me and says, Steve, you worked on this. How do I fix it? And I go, oh, okay, let me fix it. And I'll fix it right away and get it out the door. But at that point, we run into technical debt. We say, Steve knows about this and nobody else. And the purpose for me coming into that situation is to say, okay, I do understand how to fix this, but let me walk you through it so that you'll understand too, so that we can share the knowledge. And technical debt is a big problem. Beyond that, it's about code ownership. If we all take ownership of everything, then we're all going to have some personal stake in it, and it's going to make our product better overall. This idea of solving other people's problems, people talk about it a lot. I read a blog called three reasons to stop solving other people's problems. You know, like it's there. People talk about it, but it comes down to shared ownership. If there's knowledge to be shared, we should share it. You don't want to be the guy that has all the knowledge about a certain area of a project. You don't want to be that guy. Why? Because you end up being the guy that always solves those problems, and you never get to do anything else. You want to share the code. If that always becomes your responsibility, you'll just get stuck. People, I know Sam has complained a little bit about being stuck on LAC for so long because he knew so much about LAC. So it's a problem, and we can solve it by sharing knowledge. But I think in doing that, we end up loving our code, and I think that's something that we should probably take to the bank. Love your code. Love what you do. On a personal level, to love your code, take pride in what you do and do your best job. Work hard. You want to go home from work feeling like you did a good thing. And I think that you'll only be satisfied in what you do if you work hard doing it. If you're just doing the bare minimum to get along, you're going to hate your job. Honestly, like, it's funny because it's psychologically backwards. You think, if I don't have to work very hard, I'm going to be fine and I'm just going to be totally relaxed. It's not true. You'll end up hating it. You'll be like, oh, everything's a big problem all the time because you didn't work hard enough at the front to make it easier for you later because you're only trying to do the bare minimum. So take pride. Do your best job. And when you make decisions about code, defend your decisions, but be respectful. You know, like Corey, our bosses, those guys love for us to have opinions. In fact, when you get hired, they like to hear your opinions about things, because if you take a personal stance on something, then they say, ah, that guy takes ownership of the things that he's doing. That guy is invested in it, and they want to see that. But we have to be communicative, and we have to be nice. And I wrote down this epic sentence. I wrote, the gauntlet of open discourse will be the threshing floor of our ideas. And what I mean by that is basically when we talk about stuff, we'll figure out what's good and what's not good. So don't be rude, be nice. But defend your decisions. I think it's a good idea to do that. And find what you're good at. This is another thing that developers, me personally especially, I get stuck in this situation where everybody's going to have an expertise, right? Don't be ashamed of your expertise. And I get in this position where people say, oh, Steve's really good at front-end code or whatever, right? And I go, oh, no, I'm good at lots of stuff, guys. I'm good at lots of stuff. And don't be ashamed. I fall into this trap. If you're good at something, that's helpful to the community, to us as a group. Don't be ashamed of your expertise. Don't tout it. That's stupid. But just let it be what it is. If somebody says, Steve's great at front-end code, I might say, oh, thank you. I'm also here to do other things because that's part of my job. So that's stuff on a personal level that you can do. Really, just good stuff to remember. On a project level, one of the best things I've found to love the project's code is to find the values for the project. Figure out what people are working toward. On a recent project, we've been working on optimized workflow, testing coverage, and like a consistent code style. So if when I'm doing work, I work toward these points to say, okay, I found something in the workflow that's not optimized, I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to work toward that goal of the project. Everybody's going to be happy with that. Testing coverage is the same. If we have a goal for testing coverage, as you cover things more with tests, you're going to feel happier that you did that because you know it's a goal of the project. It's a value for the project. And the consistent code style is something we've worked on. A good example of that is, so for me, personally, I always liked 4 spaces for tabs in JavaScript. All my code, I just liked 4 spaces for tabs. I thought it was clean, easier to read, nothing's getting cramped, and I had a very strong opinion about this. And one day, Scott and Jake were like, hey, basically, before you got here, we all decided that in JavaScript and pretty much everything besides C#, we're going to use 2 spaces just to keep the code consistent. And at that point, when they said this is a decision for the group, it was so easy for me to say, oh, okay, I'll switch that up. That's easy. If that's a group decision that we've made to be better for the group as a whole, that's awesome. And it's for me, psychologically, it was way easier to do that than to, like, when somebody says, well, I like 2 spaces, I like 4 spaces. It just comes into a stupid argument. So this will make the team happy. And when the team is happy with you, they'll tell you that they're happy with you, and you'll be happy. And you'll love your code. You'll end up loving what you do. On the converse to this, you need to break up with your code. You need to not be married to it. When you get to this point where you're like, forget it, I did that, but I don't care anymore, it's just code, that makes less stress on you and puts it in other people's hands. And you know the saying, many hands make light work. No one's life is dependent on some pattern that you chose for a certain section of a project, right? Nobody's going to die if we scrap it and do something else. Your code is not a reflection of who you are. It might reflect your experience level or your capacity with a certain language. That stuff is fine. Don't be ashamed of your experience level or your lack of capacity with a certain language. If you are, you're just trying to put up a front, and you're not going to learn as much as you could if you said, hey, I'm not very good at this, will you guys help me? Developers fall into this a lot. We want to pretend that we're the best at everything, and we don't want to admit when we don't know how to do something. It's not a good way to go. You got to break up with it. You got to get away from the idea that everything reflects who you are personally. And honestly, I have this problem. I will defend my decisions to the death, and sometimes even without reason. So it's just code, guys. It's just code. Remember, it's just code. Don't be a duck. Don't be rude. It's just code. Break up with it. Let people break it if you want. And I think this comes from basically, firstly, people think it's you they're questioning. They say, hey, this piece is bad. I don't like it. And you go, I'm perfect. I'm not going to do anything wrong. And it's not you. It's not a reflection of you. Something might be wrong. You need to disconnect yourself from it. And it's okay. Don't be a duck. Just be nice. And that comes to the next point. Trust everyone. And this is sort of like, what do you mean trust everyone? Stranger danger. That's not exactly what I mean. Everybody in your purview. And I think this starts with giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Or what somebody referred to as respectful deferment of judgment. Basically, you come up to something wrong in the code base, and all of us, I know this is a problem we all have. You come to something wrong and you say, this is terrible, that person is terrible. No, 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 no. That person's not stupid, they're not an idiot, we all make mistakes. It's just an idea or a solution that's bad. It's not that person that's bad. As much as you need to break up with it yourself, you need to break them up with their code too. Don't say that person is tied to this intimately and that reflects who they are, because that's really, really duckish. So it's just code. Again, don't be a duck. Also, don't judge another person based on your own capabilities. Like, I find that we fall into this a lot, where you say, well, I'm great at this thing, so this person should also be equally as great as I am. That's just foolish. And I don't think we do it consciously, but I think we do it subconsciously, where we're like, I'm smarter than you, you're dumb. It's not good. We need to have respect for each other. This guy, Edmund Lau, he writes a blog called The Effective Engineer. He said, respect among peers forms the foundation for any type of open communication. So you have to respect each other. You have to trust each other. I've honestly found that developers thrive when they're trusted. If you give a developer trust with a certain thing, they are going to run with that thing. If you don't trust them, it's going to be a bad work environment. But if you do trust them with those things, it's going to be awesome. I guess recently I've noticed, and this is just sort of a colloquial example that doesn't have any scientific backing, but Daryl's been really taking charge of the OneExchange Fugu MVC transition, and I think that's really a lot because somebody gave him the trust to do it. Said, Daryl, will you handle this? And he said, yes, I will, and really has been blowing that stuff out of the water. So we have to trust and respect each other, or we'll end up working in a hostile workplace, right? And nobody wants that. You don't want a hostile environment. If you do have a hostile environment, people will leave, right? People will start leaving rapidly if it becomes uncomfortable. And it starts with the best people. And that's the problem. Like, if you're great, you don't have to work at a certain place. If it becomes toxic, you can go, right? And then you just end up with people who don't know stuff as well, or who are inexperienced, or who feel like they have to work at a certain place because they can't get work somewhere else. And then it just becomes more and more toxic, and it falls in on each other. We have to mitigate this by trusting each other and not being ducks. It's got to be a good, wonderful work environment, and that's what I hope happens. So trust everyone. On the micro level, though, trust no one. Um, Nobody is perfect all the time. I don't mean that when you come to somebody's code and you think it's wrong, it's probably not wrong. I just mean that give them the benefit of the doubt, right? If you see something that's wrong, talk to the person that made it. Figure out why they made it that way. Use git blame. I know this is like, everybody has this weird stigma about git blame, like, oh, you can't do that. That's so rude. No, it's not. Figure out who wrote something and go talk to them. Find out who did it. Find out why. If they didn't have a great reason for doing it, or if it could be done in a better way, that's under your purview. Fix it, but figure it out. But again, don't be a duck. It's just code. Don't go over there and be like, hey, I noticed that this is wrong and you're stupid. Like, this is dumb. Be nice. We need to learn the art of respectful disagreement. Just as people in general, we need to respectfully disagree with each other because it just devolves into name-calling and stupid crap if we don't. I think it starts with the benefit of the doubt, like we mentioned. Just say to yourself, maybe they weren't being stupid. Maybe they just made a mistake. Maybe they had an idea of something else in the project that I'm not quite understanding yet. I need to go talk to them. But that starts with the benefit of the doubt. And I think one of the things, if you're being a duck, if you are not being nice to people, it comes from, I think, a possibility of two places. Either it's out of fear, and you're trying to hide the fact that you don't understand something, and you're trying to put up this front like you're the best, and so you're afraid people are going to find out that you don't know what's going on, and so you put up this, I'm the best, you're stupid, and it's fear. It's all just fear. Or it comes out of a fact that you actually do think you're better than that person, and they're not worth your respect. And that's, if that's what you're doing, you really are a duck. Just forget it. You can't. You're lost. Just kidding. Just stop doing that. If that's you, if you're the person who honestly thinks that other people are not worth your respect, you need to probably recognize that and change your attitude. But I think that's what it is. And I guess I would say, if you're afraid, just don't be afraid. I don't think, as long as we remember that we respect each other, we're not gonna, make fun of you because you don't understand something as well as somebody else might. You know what I mean? And if you really think that you're better than everyone, you just really need to take a hard look at yourself and figure out how to fix that, because we're all just people, right? And we're all on different positions in our timeline. Some of us are smarter than others just by nature, and so we get things quicker, but that doesn't make you better. You didn't do anything to be smarter. That's just who you are. So don't take it as a point of pride. Work hard, help everybody else to work hard. Be good at your job. Be nice. Don't be a duck. So, easy stuff now. Stay on task. This is really one of the easiest ways to be a good employee. And by this, I don't mean just a butt in a chair. I don't mean that you're just sitting there doing your job. I mean more than that. Doing your job is good, but learn about patterns of behavior. Figure out the best way for you to work. And here's a good example. So developers have a ramp-up time when they start working on a certain thing. Usually it's at least 20 minutes. You need at least 20 minutes to wrap your head around a project or a certain piece of what you were doing once you've broken away from it. So I would say, if that's the case, give yourself at least an hour to get any work done at all. This might mean that you have to say no to meetings or talk to somebody and say, can we reschedule this meeting because during this time I need to be working, and if I break away from it, I'm going to lose a bunch of time trying to get back into it later. So figure out patterns of behavior. Learn your own patterns of behavior. Figure out how you work best when you tend to reach a point of minimal returns in programming, and maximize your time. So if you find that you're bad at code at 3:30 in the afternoon, for some reason that's when you just are very non-productive, don't code then. Take a break, come back and answer emails or comment on pull requests or do something that's not requiring your absolute best work. Just be strategic about it. And I think if you do this consistently, you're actually going to be more productive overall. If you figure out your best work times, the best way for you to stay on task, overall it's going to make you better as an employee. And people are going to be like, all right, and you're going to be happy, and everybody's going to be happy, and we'll all have a good time. So just use your time to be effective. That's all I mean here by stay on task. But the converse to this, as you're probably expecting, is to get off task. It's been suggested that employers should give particularly development employees, 20% time to just work on side projects. So here we have like Open Source Fridays and your katas, that kind of thing. And actually, This time they found this off-task time is where you're going to find your best solutions. You're going to figure stuff out for some reason, not focusing on the problem better than you would constantly trying to focus on the problem. So take that time. Use the time that you're given because it's going to be super helpful overall. And also, and this is sort of like tangential, but feel free to do stuff that you love outside of work. Like, even if it's work related, probably don't do work outside of work because you need the balance. You need some rest in your life. But if you like building Raspberry Pi stuff, or you like programming electronic music, or you like writing, or whatever, any of that stuff is going to actually help you in your job. So embrace that. Like, know what you like to do and spend some time doing it. It's good for you. Get off task a little bit. Woodworking, there's all kinds of crazy stuff you could do that would actually help you in the long run. A really good example is we're reading the Lean Startup right now, just as a whole, and he talks specifically about, in the beginning of the book, he started looking at production environments where they're actually producing goods rather than software, right? And saying these principles could be applied to software and it would be helpful. The interesting thing is looking at production environments where they build stuff is not focusing on a code problem. It's not solving a specific problem for the job he was doing. Just looking at other things and figuring out, hey, I can connect these two. So do that. Do it. It's fun. And you don't have to stay on task all the time. Don't be so serious. Just relax a little bit. It'll make life better. So, to recap, software is hard, right? We have a hard job. I really think that, honestly, people do not understand how difficult software is. It's just one of those things it's really hard. We have to know a lot. We have to put together a lot. There's a ton of stuff that connects. It's a difficult thing, and people come to you and say, hey, I need this one feature. Go click those buttons and make it happen. That's not exactly how it works. So it's a hard job. But to help us out, software is soft. We can make it better for ourselves, and we can make it easier for ourselves if we just understand that everything we're doing is malleable. Everything we're doing can be changed if we need it to. So, and if something needs to change, realize that it's all your responsibility. If it's part of what you're doing, it's under your guidance, and it's your responsibility to make sure it gets done or get it done. That on the macro level. On the micro level, it's not your responsibility. Some things are just not your responsibility. Some things are just things that somebody else needs to do, and you probably need to go communicate with them. One thing I wanted to point out, we're talking a lot about communication here. Almost every slide in this whole thing has been about okay, so you want to change something? Talk to somebody and figure out how hard it's going to be. Is this somebody else's responsibility? You need to talk to them. It's all about communication. So try, if you're bad at that, I don't know, some of us might be bad at communicating. Read up on it. Figure out some better communication skills. Just try to be nice. I think that's sort of an easy way of going about life, is just try to be nice. Realize if somebody says something to you that's rude, realize not to say that to somebody else. I don't know. So anyway, communicate. Sometimes it's not your responsibility. Talk to the person to whom it is their responsibility and say, get this thing done, and be nice about it. Also, love your code. Love what you do. I think it would be great if we all could just passionately be excited about the stuff we're doing. I mean, why did we? A lot of us worked pretty hard to get to where we're at in software, so we should love it. The fact that we worked hard to get here and we're doing stuff that we like doing. So love it. Work hard. Figure out ways for you to like what you're doing, and break up with it. Here's a good way to put these two things together. If you love what you did and it's a fantastic pattern that you think is amazing, and somebody comes to you and says, this is interesting, but it's not good for what we're doing here, don't get offended. And in fact, if you're broken up with your code, you can take that and say, okay, I understand what you're saying here. I'm not married to this code. We can scrap it, but I really like this aspect of it. And if you're open that way, you can actually keep aspects of it that you like because you're talking to people and communicating, and you're not trying to defend yourself because you think it's some reflection of your goodness or badness. So break up with it. Furthermore, trust everyone. Everybody that you're working with needs trust, and beyond that, they need your respect. We need to respect each other. We can't come in and just start yelling at each other. And I know I tend to be pretty sarcastic, and I don't know if it always comes off where I'll say something mean in a sarcastic way and not actually trying to be mean. So I have this problem too, but we need to trust and respect each other. But also on the micro level, we need to trust no one. We need to inspect stuff that we're doing and say, does this smell? If this has a smell, I should talk to this person and figure out what's going on here. Don't trust them completely, that's all. Don't just assume that they did it perfectly, because nobody has, no, I don't think any of us even have a perfect day. So trust no one. And lastly, stay on task. Do your best to figure out how to be a great employee, how to maximize your own time to help the team be better overall, and also get off task. Do stuff that is fun. Do stuff that's interesting to you outside of work. And honestly, it's going to make you better. It's going to make you feel better overall, and it's going to make your work better. It's weird the way stuff, I don't know if you guys know this. We try to compartmentalize everything and be like, this is work time, this is home time, this is sleep time, but it's all connected. Everything works together. So we try to pretend we can compartmentalize, but none of us really can. And lastly, the theme, it's just code, don't be a duck. So anybody have any questions about that? That was about 30 minutes long. We've got half an hour left if you have any thoughts or questions. No? All right, well, that's it. Congratulations, you all know how to be awesome now, or how not to suck.